All right, let's talk about the banking situation out there. I want to cover off on what's happening in the banks, things you can do to prepare yourself, what some of the risks are. I also want to reaffirm that you should not be taking all your money out of the bank. That's what helps cause this problem. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about some alternatives to banks. So let's get started. Let's get down to business. Hit it. Stacking surfer. Like become your best friend. Balances in your bank and stack. You need a bank, all right? And when I say bank, it's a general term. It could be a credit union, it could be a regional bank, it could be a national bank. Just about every one of us is going to be using a credit card or a debit card online, and you're really going to need a bank to do that. I mean, I guess you could go without a bank and buy preloaded Visa or American Express. You really don't want to have to deal with that stuff. So having a bank is important. For me, banks have become more of a way to help me do transactions and to move money around than it has been for a place to just store my wealth. So I don't store a large amount of money at my bank, but I do store enough money to operate my business as well as my personal life on a 30-day rolling basis, okay? So I've got my paycheck that comes in from my day job, that funnels into my bank, and then I use that to pay my bills. But if I've got extra money left over, first thing I'm trying to do is pay some debt down, but I'll take some of it and pay myself as well. I do believe in paying yourself first. And I'll buy some silver. I'm always buying a little bit of silver, usually on a weekly basis. But if not, at least each paycheck I get. And why silver? Because I'm not making so much money that I have enough money to buy an extra ounce of gold or even a 10th ounce of gold usually. If you have a lot more money, you have a lot more coming in, or you've already paid all your debts off, then I think, consider looking at gold for that. Let's talk about the kinds of banks that are out there. So you really have three primary types of banks that exist right now. You've got credit unions, which are owned by the people that are depositors, the members. They do have their funds insured. And then you've got your regional banks. Those are going to be anywhere from, a single branch to a few branches. So it may be in your state. They may go into multiple states, but they're not nationwide. And then you have your big national banks, which are nationwide and tend to be very large. They also tend to pay less interest right now. And one of the reasons for that is more people are moving their money out of regional banks and putting it into the national banks. If you've got people just giving you money, why would you go out of your way to pay too much interest, right? They're trying to make profits from it. At least that's one of the theories I think that's going on there. And with banks, you have FDIC insurance. For both of credit unions and banks, it's up to $250,000 US per account. If you have a trust, you can go to a much higher amount based on how many people are beneficiaries of the trust. Not a financial advisor, guys, so you'll have to talk to your attorney and your accountant if you're needing to set something like that up. One thing I recommend is having multiple banks. So right now, I've got 2 banks and a credit union that I use. I'm going to be looking for a 4th credit union pretty soon. Part of that's going to be to help me find bank boxes of coins that we can do some coin roll hunting in. And then I need a place that I can be able to return those without having to roll everything. I just don't have the time for that. One thing I like about credit unions is they tend to be a lot less risky. They tend to be more secure. We didn't see a lot of credit unions get hit in 2008, but we did see the savings and loans get wiped out. They all disappeared in 2008. And that's one that I'm linked to with my family, was a savings and loan. I had my dad on it. You can see this video here where we did a live stream and talked about banks. He was on board of directors for many years. I was looking to take his position, but unfortunately everything hit in 2008 and wasn't able to do that. And they all went out of business. And they were really primarily set up to help people with getting home loans and really set up to help the community. And a lot of the ways that they made money got taken out a long time ago, and so they ended up having to be a little riskier in how they lent money and who they lent money to. And that did catch up with them in 2008, and for whatever reason, the president at the time decided not to bail any of them out. But he bailed just about all the banks out. Credit unions seem to be a little safer. So one of the things I'm going to give you guys some advice about is it doesn't hurt to diversify and have multiple institutions that you work with. To make it easier, you may have one that brings your direct deposit in, and you may have one that you're using to make all of your payments, your electronic bill pay. You may have another one that you use to store some savings in. I think the important thing to remember with banks is they are businesses. They're trying to be profitable. When interest rates were really, really low, they were buying bonds. They're upside down on those bonds now. Banks are definitely having some issues with liquidity right now. It's a little tighter. I'm noticing that a lot of banks are offering some really good benefits and bonuses if you bring a lot of cash over. For one of my banks, if you bring over a deposit of $25,000 and then you leave it there for, I think it's like 6 months, they'll give you $300 cash. I've seen another one that's now doing $900 cash if you do something like that. So a lot of banks are starting to offer those things, which tells me they need liquidity, they need the cash. Anyway, so there could be some risks. Well, there are some risks, and those could start to cascade and have problems. One thing I would recommend is multiple banks, and then kind of watching what's happening in the news to see if there's going to be some issues. Now, how do you prepare and mitigate this? Because I do think you need to have a bank in order to function. One is you can have cash at home. If you're doing that, I recommend getting a safe. I don't recommend putting that in the drawer. And I recommend keeping that out of your master bedroom or closet. Put it in another part of your house. Maybe even avoid the office. Those are places that thieves usually look at. And my recommendation is anywhere from 2 weeks to about 3 months worth of cash. If you have more than 3 months of savings, then I think you start considering and talking to your financial advisor about how much cash versus precious metals you might stack. The other thing I recommend is definitely having some backup savings for your property taxes. Whether you have your house paid off or not, if you've got a significant amount of equity in it, you want to make sure you can pay your property taxes so that you're able to retain it. And that's one of the reasons I like to invest in gold, is I see that as wealth insurance and also property tax insurance, so to speak. If we do have an issue and they do go down and you've got your emergency savings, you'll feel like you're in pretty good shape. But what about the money that's in there if something happens? What I have done is I have started getting paper statements again. I think it's helpful. And the paper statements are at least some record I could take to the bank and say, hey, look, you got hacked, you lost my stuff, and this is what was in there. This is the last statement before things fell apart. I want to be made whole. I don't know if they'll do it. I don't know if it'll hold up in court, but it's the best thing I can think of. Short of you going in and looking at your balance and printing off a sheet every day, don't do that. That's kind of extreme. The last thing I'll just tell you guys with that is I like the concept of being your own bank. I've been able to buy gold and silver, and when I have emergencies, I've been able to use some of that. Like I said, I don't like to keep a lot of cash in the bank. And I had some pretty large emergencies that I thought, hey, 3 months worth of savings would be enough to cover an emergency. It was more than that. So I actually had to dip into some of my other stuff. So I have actually taken some of my gold coins that have gone up in value and sold those so that I can pay off some of my debts, as well as reestablish a cash savings again. If you're only stacking a little bit, you're probably not going to run into that situation. But if you're starting to stack more significantly, I would be surprised if you never sell any silver or gold. And you'll hear people talk about that, and usually when that's happening, they're not completely being their own bank. They're not storing their savings that they may need to draw on in precious metals. They usually have a lot more cash reserves, or they're putting it into stocks or something else. And that's okay too. But if you're starting to put more into the metals with the idea of being able to sell it, you need to look for certain kinds that you're going to do too. All right, guys, I'm kind of worn out, so until next time, peace out.